Hello everybody, welcome back to KSP POV. We are in the middle of the Eve project. As you can see here, we are high above orbit in Eve because we had last left off by scanning the surface and mapping out all that we can see. We spotted an anomaly and the goal was to touch down and check it out. However, considering the fact that Eve is one of the hardest planets to conquer in the Kerbal Space Program, we do have to consider a lot of challenges ahead, especially after the destructive nature of the landing on Lathe for the KSP POV crowd and just how much was destroyed there. We have the same amount of repair kits as they did, 8 in total, so we are going to have to take things into consideration. Valentina, being the clever pilot that she is, decided to turn the mission on its head, and rather than heading to Eve first, even though we are in a great orbit above it and we have a perfect approach, we have officially changed our mission parameters and we are headed to Gilly instead. She's met with little enthusiasm, however it is clear that her crew is ready and prepared. This is going to be a significant challenge considering the fact that we have next to no Delta V left in our liquid fuel, and we are going to be primarily using our OPT engine for this, so there's going to be a lot of low thrust, long burns. We can extend our apoapsis out to meet up with it, however it will be very difficult to capture at a polar orbit like that, so we are going to change our inclination after spending quite some time to make sure that we would be indeed going the same direction. We're going to go ahead and extend it out. This is primarily going to be pushing out our orbit, but we do want to give it a little bit of an inclination change before we get started, which will make our job a bit easier going forward. Now, we are, like I mentioned before, only going to be using our OPT engine. We don't have a lot of ore remaining, which means that we don't have, even though it is a fairly cheaty resource and can power the craft even without liquid fuel and any kind of nuclear power or anything like that, it still is limited to a resource that we can't actually replenish until we touch down on a surface of some sort to do some mining. So it is imperative that we make our next choices wisely, because there's still plenty of time to mess up this mission and make it an impossibility to continue with this craft, and like the KXP crowd, have to send a supplemental craft to fix it. So we're going to go ahead and kill the maneuver, because right now all we need is just enough of an inclination change that we can now focus on pointing prograde and just extending out our apoapsis to meet up with the closest point that Gilly passes near Eve. Thankfully, it was we were in the right angle for it, so we have a nice good point at its periapsis, which will make interception a little bit easier. So we are going to just do a lot of this back and forth. Since it is a low thrust engine, it will take us a couple passes, as opposed to a liquid fuel engine that we have currently, which could probably do this in a single maneuver. However, that single maneuver would cost hundreds of Delta V, and we just don't have that. So we're just going to take the time to be patient. One thing to note about Gilly is it has the lowest gravity in the Kerbal system, that's Kerbal systems. So this is going to be a very delicate situation where a little bit of thrust will go a long way, and if we aren't careful, we can quickly find ourselves on an escape trajectory. So this will be an interesting challenge. I have personally never been to Gilly before. I've never actually even seen Gilly. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I am up for the challenge. I only have a little bit of RCS. A little, actually, over half, so that's not too bad. But we don't have a lot, but RCS is going to be our friend here because of the fact that it isn't as powerful as our engines. However, we have a significantly powerful RCS system, so it's not going to be easy. Right now, we need to produce more. Well, we don't need to produce more black hole resource. However, it would behoove us just to have enough on hand that we don't run out. So we can tell that it's working because it completely drained our electrical charge, and as we time warp forward, the ore is slowly disappearing, and the OPT black hole resource is even more slowly increasing. And we're going to allow ourselves to have about 21%, a little less by the time we get there, but that should be enough to handle our burn. We are doing an inclination change right now to make sure that we can line up perfectly with Gilly when it arrives, because of the fact that it is a very difficult planet to land on due to its low gravity. It's hard to get yourself captured easily, so we are going to try to give ourselves as much of an advantage as possible. I try to play around with making a burn at the descending node, but it's just not a great idea because it just pushes out our apoapsis even that much further. So instead, we are going to do all of our inclination changes at our apoapsis. So, like I mentioned, it is going to be necessary to get ourselves lined up in the perfect position as possible. And luckily, we have plenty of time before we have any kind of chance of even making a maneuver, so we can really fine-tune this process. And I have found that this is worthwhile. I think even going forward, it might be a good idea to just think about how we can maximize the ease of our approach, even if it takes us extra time. Because of the fact that we're not limited by TAC life support anymore, we can spend a little extra time in orbit if it means a safer approach. Because again, these are many things that I have never done before, places I've never been, all in the sake of exploration and experimentation to see which viewpoint is the best, first person or third. To those of you who've been watching the entirety of the Janus project, let me know in the comments which one has been a little bit more interesting. I mean, I'm still going to be continuing them both the same regardless, but it'd be fun to know which side is winning in the public opinion anyways. But I'm very curious to see how this plays out on the larger scale, because given the fact that it is a space race, we are going to also be seeing which one, not necessarily which one's more enjoyable, but which one can be faster. As you see here, I'm struggling to get an interception at any time, no matter how many orbits we go, so I decided to extend out our orbit to change our timing up a little bit. This is a trick that you can do in rendezvousing, even just a couple crafts together. If you're not getting good interceptions, just change your orbit, either extend it or limit it, and you'll have different results. But anyways, we are going to go ahead and push this out for now. It wouldn't be a bad idea to essentially just match the orbit of Gilly, but we do need to make sure that we can do it in such a way that we will still ensure that we meet up, because if we match Gilly's orbit but we're nowhere near it, then we'll just be orbiting relative to it but without ever being able to meet it. So when we extend out our orbit, I see that we actually have a fairly close interception here, and I decide rather than trying to make the perfect orbit, I'm just going to go for it, see what I can get with this. It only takes 90 meters per second of delta V to achieve this, and it puts us on a relatively polar orbit. I don't know what's going on with my textures sometimes. Some of the surfaces of planets and moons in map view have changed, and I'm not sure what that's from, but regardless, sometimes restarting can fix it. So after I get this maneuver dialed in, we are going to just reload the save and keep going, and hopefully that will take care of it. But as you see here, with this approach, it's only going to take 69.2 meters to circularize, and that's at a low circularization too. That's burning a lot more than we need to. So I'm pretty satisfied with our approach here. We are going to just take what we can get and then fine tune it later, since it's not going to take too much. So 15 kilometers above the surface is good enough because it gives us a long enough time period that we can slow down before we get there. I go ahead and kill the planned maneuver, and I'm just going to dial this in through RCS by itself, because that's just that's how little gravity is here. That's how much little effects, little changes can affect it. So now it's only 68.1, so pretty happy with this. We're going to go ahead and reload, time warp our way, and get ourselves ready for the maneuver. And we get close. Less than a day approaches. We take a look at all of our engineers, our scientists, super happy. These people will be very much crucial in the landing process, as they have a lot more information than our pilots do. Our pilots are great at atmospheric flight, but sometimes you need the technical data. So here we are at our approach in the sphere of influence. We're going to go ahead and switch back over to Valentina to at least initiate the process. However, as we start to look at our information, I go over to resources and I realize there is no OPT black hole, and there's no ore. I can't even make any right now, even if I wanted to. So I struggle to get our ELU engines on because our C2 action group hasn't worked this entire time for some reason. So rather than getting Kerbal out there at this last moment, I decide to just use our other engines, which have a little more thrust, but nonetheless can still handle the maneuver using our liquid fuel alone. But because of the fact that we have our liquid fuel being used in those engines, we can plot it in through remote text flight computer to automatically handle it, which is much more preferable. The OPT engine just wasn't capable to really integrate with remote tech very easily, so I've been having to manually do all those burns, so it was quite relaxing to allow the computer to handle it. So now we're pushing out our orbit to the very extent that Gilly will allow us, 112 kilometers above the surface. 113 is the ideal height for our scanning equipment. However, 113 kilometers is an escape trajectory, so 112 will have to do. So Lars Kerman, being the danger seeker that he is, decides to get out of the cockpit to adjust the engine control. Having those 4 little engines were great, but we're going to want our ELU engines. However, those are just incredibly powerful when given Gilly's gravity, so we are going to fine-tune them to lower their thrust considerably, making this maneuver a little more easy. I was hoping to get a nice shot of Lars in that lower camera. Unfortunately, it was just too dark. We weren't able to spot him at all, so just some wasted time there. But nonetheless, we're far out in orbit enough that we don't need to be as quick as in other scenarios. So, given the rules of POV, we have to get our Kerbal close enough to simulate the option that they would be the one doing it. So we go ahead and get them close enough and then switch over to the regular view, so where we can actually do the throttle limiting. Some IVAs allow you to limit the thrust in the cockpit itself, and I actually really enjoy when that happens because saves us from having to do things like this, but I'm glad that our Kerbals are brave enough to do these things. We're going to take a quick look at Gilly, our first eyewitness look. The surface is very interesting, very different than the Mun. Rocky like the Mun. It seems to have scatter, which is interesting. I wonder if the collision there is as detailed as the Mun, but nonetheless, the dirty, earthy brown is a very interesting texture that I have yet to experience in Kerbal Space Program, so I'm excited to see this new place. But now Lars swiftly and expertly gets himself back aboard the craft so they can plot in this maneuver. Valentina checks on him. He seems to be pretty good, no space madness, so we are ready to go. All we need to do now is plot it into remote text flight computer, sit back and relax, and let it handle the orbit change. We are going to extend out our apoapsis to be the correct height, but then we're also going to need to do the same at the periapsis to make a nice circular orbit. And with hardly any effort right there, we get our apoapsis extended, and then just a quick few button presses automatically takes care of our periapsis. Once again, only a handful of meters per second delta V that it takes to accomplish this. So even though we had to go fall back on our liquid fuel engines, we still have 88 meters per second, which, you know, it sounds terrible. It sounds like hardly anything. We should be calling this mission a failure here, but the fact that it's Gilly, that 88 meters goes a long way. So we are going to go ahead and get our components out, press all the action groups necessary to get our scanning equipment deployed. We got our cargo base there. 2 is the solar panels, we don't need that. 3 is the communication dish, we don't need that. I forget what 4 is for. I can't remember and I never looked, but 5 is the actual scanning process here. So it deploys our telescope, our big radar dish, and our tiny little anomaly scanner. So pretty happy with that. We can go ahead and bring up the map and watch our progress as we scan the planet. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to get a good look or possibly any information at all due to the fact that the equipment was so advanced and required such a high altitude to work. So I was thankful to see some actual information being developed on the map. And once we time warped even further and saw that it completely filled out to an 100% status, I was very happy, and we have now officially, completely mapped 100% of Gilly, meaning that we have completely mapped the Eve system. The entirety of the program has been completed as far as the mapping goes. We have an anomaly right here, which is great. I want to visit all of them if I can. That can be our specialized landing locations. We're going to go ahead and get Roni out. I was hoping to collect some of the science from the scanning equipment. I was also needing to turn back the throttle up on our ELU engines, because even though it was good to achieve a more precise burn time using the remote tech, for now I think I'm going to want them full speed again, so that way we can take off and quickly leave if we need, because I think on Gilly we're going to primarily do a lot of our maneuvering via RCS, because it just works. So we're going to go ahead and position Roni out into next to the engine. Technically, I should probably have an engineer here, but, you know, a scientist will do. He's knowledgeable in the actual engine design. But unfortunately, the thrust is already up. I don't know what happened. I guess it just automatically reverted at some point. But nonetheless, that job is taken care of. So you can go ahead and start heading back towards the front of the ship. I decided not to stow the communication dish and let him do it when he takes the data. However, it is very important that we position ourselves correctly as to not get thrown off. After a quick shot for posterity with the craft, he goes and heads in to collect the data. But as we get close enough, we right click, we don't actually make contact, and it seems that all we can really do is scrap the parts for equipment. Don't understand why or how that happens, but it doesn't give us the option to grab the data from that, so I'm guessing that it's just built in there. I'm pretty sure the scientists should be able to grab it out of anyone, so the fact that we weren't able to means that it's probably just not accessible. So that's fine. This mission isn't actually really about science at all. This is just the exploration. We do have some science EVA kits, but other than that, all we're really going to be grabbing is crew reports or EVA reports or the EVA experiments. So nonetheless, not really a science gathering expedition. So I'm not too worried. Anyways, we're going to have to get ourselves back onto the craft. There is no visible ladder. It does give you the option to grab, but I've found that more of a detriment than a benefit at times. So you kind of have to position yourself in and thrust yourself forward, which can be a little harrowing if you smack too hard against the craft and start it spinning. We get a peek at Eve out the front window, and it's nice to see. We're going to go ahead and retract all of our pieces all at once using the 0 action key. Then we're going to have to retract the radiators as well. Take a closer look at Eve. It is unfortunate that we weren't able to see it first. I really wanted to touch down, fly this plane, see how it does in comparison to the KSP plane on lathe. But nonetheless, we will be seeing that next time. As long as all goes well here, I do believe that we should have enough delta V to land, and we do have enough monopropellant to control ourselves. Once again, I had a weird shadow bug on the moon, so I decided to reload a save and come back, and that did indeed fix it. So it takes like no time at all to lower our periapsis to a point that we have a much better time coming in. And we're not too far off from where the anomaly is, so we're just going to kind of eyeball a maneuver here, give it a little bit of retrograde, and then when we throw on the trajectories, it's kind of surprising just how accurate it ended up being, how close we are to the anomaly's landing spot. Like, I didn't plan this at all. It wasn't part of the testing or anything. It just happened. And it's only 5.4 meters per second out of our 85. So I'm pretty happy with that. We can go ahead and plot that into Flight Computer and yet again not have to worry about our approach. So we now have some visuals on our cameras, so it's good to be back here in the Scientist and Engineering Bay because I have a lot more information that I can look at. And the screens are larger, so I have a lot clearer vision of what I'm looking at. Unfortunately, our landing camera is forward-facing, so we can't actually use that to gauge our descent. So we do sacrifice the left screen for a visual approach. Thankfully, we're only approaching at 3 meters per second vertically and 2.5 meters per second horizontally. Like, these are not dangerous speeds at all. I actually had to speed up the footage considerably. This was the slowest approach that I've ever had. However, you know, this was all comparative to the celestial body. Like, even though we're only going at a couple meters per second at a time, I still felt it was as dangerous as landing on the Mun or Minmus because, relatively speaking, those were fairly fast speeds. So we're going to go ahead and put our landing gear down. I did have to switch back to Valentina's control a couple times for certain buttons like the brakes to keep them locked on. But we're going to keep our brakes locked on to hopefully slow us down. It's pretty clear that our hover engines probably shouldn't be used very much here because they'll probably end up just lifting us off the surface entirely. So in order to actually come to a stop, we need to rely on both our brakes but the RCS to kind of counteract our reverse movement. So everyone is happy that we have successfully and safely touched down. We can chalk landing on Gilly up as a success. We have our drilling components ready. We're going to go ahead and go through the motions to start fueling our craft because worst case scenario, if we do end up falling off this rock, we want to at least do so with a full tank of gas. We do need to plant a flag, however. We can't actually consider this conquered until we get a Kerbal out and planting the flag. And then our secondary goal of visiting the anomaly isn't required for the program for the Janus project. However, it is definitely, you know, the bonus and kind of the expected result. So now I am going to try to get my drill going, but I wasn't getting confirmation that it was actually deployed because of the fact that the landing gear was in the way. However, seeing the dust kick up from the back of it told me that it was. I went and refreshed myself on what each of the action groups handled, so I can get a better idea of how to manage this in first person, because I did like the fact that I could handle the mining process through these action groups if considered correctly. The bleeding of some action groups into the other was a little difficult to deal with though. But nonetheless, we have our drill going, but we are moving, and I can't time warp until we stop that. So I use the RCS to kind of push forward to hopefully stop our momentum, and at the same time I was mashing the time warp key so that way it could just kind of lock in place as soon as possible. We're going to go ahead and get the information up here. Even though we're not going to be doing much in third person, I actually don't end up coming back here at all. I still like having this available at some point to reference if I need to. But thankfully all the information we need is actually right here on our resources. And after going through our cameras a little bit, we actually find the drill cam that was meant for this. We hadn't used yet, so I had forgotten about it. But we get confirmation that everything is working. Our ore is increasing. Our liquid fuel is increasing. We now have a full tank, so we're going to go ahead and switch over onto monopropellant. I'm time warping. Excuse me, I'm just going to cut through the footage, make that fast, get that done. And then after that, we fill our tanks with ore. So now we can produce the OPT black hole resource whenever we need to. So 100% liquid fuel, 100%, well, 99.7% monopropellant, 100% ore, and almost the full thing. Yeah, no, 100% electricity as well. We are fully ready to go. It doesn't seem very wise to move the entire craft forward in order to visit the anomaly, so we are actually going to get a Kerbal out there instead. Rowaney, our only scientist, is the suitable choice. However, when we go to get him out, for some reason our craft gets bumped up into the well, I don't want to say the air, but you know, it gets bumped up and is no longer grounded, which is a dangerous situation to be in, and we must handle this first. We're not very high, we're not going very fast, and it seems like we're not actually going to be going very far. In fact, we're going a little bit closer to the anomaly, but this is a situation we need to take care of. So until further notice, Roni, you gotta sit back down. Valentina is going to take care of this, and just await further instructions. It is nice having lights on the bottom of the craft. It does give me an idea of how far away from the surface we are. We're going to go ahead and use our landing screen to identify how fast we're going in either direction. And once we have a suitable touchdown, there we go, we can go ahead and resume the process. But it's not just a matter of touchdown, but we actually also need to make sure that we can stop moving forward. So we're going to physics warp a little bit to allow our craft to kind of push its way, and then we're going to use that same technique of using our RCS in the reverse thrust maneuver in order to cancel our forward momentum. But even that isn't working, and that is because we're going sideways. But so I decide to just come to a solid landing on our belly. I feel like maybe having a wide surface area might keep us grounded a little more. But unfortunately, we can't seem to make contact. No matter what we do, even with our RCS, it just doesn't want to connect. So I'm thinking maybe our hover engines are on, so I tap them on only to realize, no, that's what they would do if they're on. So I have to bring myself back down, but I think by turning the hover engines on, it canceled out whatever was preventing the craft from making a solid connection. But solid connection is going to have to be in quotation marks, as this is kind of the best that we're going to be able to do. So Roni, just be careful as you get out. Don't hit the spaceship and knock it off into orbit or escape trajectory. Alright? But unfortunately, I forgot to grab his science experiments, before heading out, so we are going to have to get them out on EVA. The science experiment isn't crucial, but any good scientist in Kerbal can't pass up a good golf swing. So we're going to go ahead and land ever so delicately on top. Once again, being very aware that any slight maneuver could just send us both flying at this point. And then we have to try to figure out how to get Roni back on board. Oof. And with a quick jump, the altitude starts gaining, and Roni takes one last look at the craft. On the off chance that this is the last time he sees them, he tells them that it has been an honor working alongside them. But anyways, we are now pointed up to the anomaly. It's actually only 700 and so meters away, so it's basically on the other side of this hill. Our precision landing is it's definitely been getting a lot better, and I'm pretty happy with that. On Monday's episode, we're actually going to talk about precision landing in Kerbal, utilizing rocket landers on the Mun. So I'm pretty excited about that. But for now, we are approaching the anomaly, which, as we see closer, is another obelisk, but this obelisk is a bit different than any that we've seen in any episode on my channel thus far. Even in our every POI on Kerbin, we've never seen a green obelisk like this. We take a quick peek at this beautiful piece of technology. The nod from the developers to the players, giving them reasons to explore uncharted areas. The mods by the helpful modding community. I'm speaking primarily about ScanStat, but the mods put together to create the information necessary to achieve these missions. Just wonderful. And then the visuals, visual mods that accompany everything. It's just so beautiful. This game is over a decade old, and yet it's a treasure trove of endless wonder. Meh, they should have sent a poet. But with that, Roni Kerman is the first to plant a flag in the Janus project. Even though the KXP crowd got to Lathe first, they did indeed beat the milestone of landing on another celestial body. Roni is the first to actually make the conquering milestone. Essentially, POV is now 1 point ahead on the project. So after doing the golf ball experiment, Roni realized that it is actually on an escape trajectory here, and it takes very little momentum to get into orbit. So his last experiment before heading back to the craft is to see if he could get himself into orbit using his RCS alone, to be the very first single Kerbal to orbit in the project as well. Not an official milestone, however, something definitely interested to consider on the record books. So we decided to keep the anomaly marker selected, so that way when we come back around, we will be able to see how far it is until we reached the starting point. So it doesn't take very much to get our apoapsis pretty high, and so from there we can just kind of even out our orbit. We'll orbit around 8,000 kilometers, 8,000 meters, excuse me. So with nothing else left to do, we can go ahead and turn our HUD off and sit back and relax. I mean, as long as your definition of relaxing includes floating in the inky black void of space with nothing but a single suit between you and sudden death, and a little over half of your RCS fuel left, going deeper and deeper into the darkness until all visible light fades. Yeah, if that's relaxing, then yeah, let's just sit back and relax here. It'll be good. So I'm watching my altitude rise here, but it is above sea level, and I'm keeping an eye at the altitude on the right side. I see that we're actually only 900 meters above the actual surface. So I'm starting to get a little nervous. We can't place a maneuver, unfortunately, because we are in, well, we're a Kerbal. We don't have the computer technology to do maneuver planning, but nonetheless, we do know that our apoapsis is 8,000, so all we need to do is bring ourselves a little bit closer to that, and we'll be able to time up our maneuver. We can't get any of the orbital information, so I just have to go by map to kind of understand how high up I am. And so I just go ahead and use the map to plan out my maneuver. Just push our prograde forward, and that was enough. We are officially in orbit, everybody. A single Kerbal did it with nothing but a jump and a dream. But now we have to orbit the full way through. Thankfully, it's a polar orbit, so we're not going to spend a lot of time in the darkness, even though there is going to be a lot less that we can see than if we were equatorial. But it's nice, we get a little view of Eve there, a little sliver of it anyways. So it's not terrible. A little while later, we are going to straighten out our orbit to come in directly above our target, which is surprisingly easy given the fact that there's such low gravity. However, we now have below half of our RCS pack left. We are currently in orbit, so if we want to land, we're going to have to cancel out our forward momentum, which will use a good chunk of it. It is a little nerve-wracking to see that crest of the hill approach so quickly, so I'm going to tilt my view down to get a better look at the surface as it comes up. But thankfully, it seems that we are high enough that we're not going to hit. However, the game freezes up, which is never a good sign. We're not within physics range of our craft, so it was a little worrisome that something may have happened over there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over just to see. And in that moment, we get our physics back, and the craft decides to lift off. We are in space low, so it doesn't have the landed bug, which is thankful, because that is quite frustrating. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. But if you don't, then hopefully you never have to deal with that. But nonetheless, we get ourselves kind of evened out. I do want to bring myself back down to the surface fully before coming back to Rowaney Kerman, because it's not going to go well, because if we switch now, there's a chance that this craft will just explode, and it'll just register the fact that it had gone too quickly, and it's just not going to survive. We throw on our hover, which is interesting to see that it doesn't completely negate our efforts to go downwards, but nonetheless, we don't have a great way of assuring ourselves that we will indeed stay grounded, so I decided last minute we're going to take the craft and we're going to try to meet Rowaney up in orbit. It may just be simpler to bring it to him, and I think it might be safer for everyone because of the fact that the physics will do funky things with the craft and potentially explode them. So as we see here, we lucked out. We actually have an interception here for a very brief moment in time. We will be within 0.3 kilometers, going only 65 meters per second relative to each other. So we have to act fast. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Rowaney, get control of him again. We're going to select a part of the craft to get a better idea of where it is, but thankfully, we actually get visuals on it very quickly, so it isn't as necessary. But now is the most important moment of Rowaney's life, because if he does not manage to intercept the target well enough, if he smacks into it, if he just loses control entirely, that is both his life and theirs affected. Yeah, he only has 1.3 units of monopropellant left, so make it count. Slowing down to 2.5 meters per second relative to the target is still fairly fast, so we're going to have to back it up a little bit. Don't have a good angle. Go ahead and grab it at the last minute, which does not help, but it does slow us down considerably. So we go in for the second pass. We grab it and then climb up a little bit, and that gives us the ability to board, and Rowaney is safe once again. However, we are not out of the woods yet. We are on a suborbital trajectory, which wouldn't be as deadly as it would be on the Mun or any other place. You know, we've talked about Gilly's low gravity all episodes, so it is, not as threatening as it could be. But nonetheless, we do need to act quickly, so we throw on full throttle going forward, and that is enough to put us on an escape trajectory out of Gilly, however back onto an orbit of Eve, and therefore once again safe. We have a full tank of gas, we have a full tank of ore. We don't have any OPT, but that doesn't matter because we can basically just rely on our liquid fuel now, because we have somewhere to the tune of like 4,000 meters per second delta V, which is more than enough to get ourselves landed on Eve safely, I believe. I'm pretty sure. If it isn't, then I may need to reconsider some things. But nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and get our solar panels out and prepare for the long journey, because this will not be in the next week, but the following one, because in the next week we are going back to the KSP crowd. They are currently, one of the Kerbals is above Lathe, waiting to land and pick up everybody else, and then take them to their anomaly so they can be second place for planting a flag. But in the next episode of this one, we will be landing on Eve, and if we plant a flag there, we will be taking first place, at least for the time being. So I'm excited. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KSP POV. If you did, think about subscribing. Drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.